As a warning, the subjects I cover often deal with death, murder, conspiracy theories, and things of that nature. So if you're sensitive to this sort of information, please don't listen. And if you do and need mental health support, please reach out to any number of resources in your local area. Thank you. And welcome to another episode of Perspective. I'm going to go out on a limb here. This episode deals with a history that's over 900 years old. It also has the potential to offend a few people, and if you are that sensitive to history, you may want to go home and rethink your life. In their day, these men were some of the toughest on earth. They took vows of poverty, could not hold property, could not receive private letters, could not marry, and had to remain celibate. They vowed never to retreat in battle and had to be in good health. They were also bankers, and particularly good bankers at that. Their holdings were substantial, and it caused more than one head of state to become concerned about the power they wielded. They met their end not at the hands of the enemy, but the hands of a king that was indebted to them, and this was the way of clearing the debt. Of course, I am speaking of the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. You probably have never heard of them, but you probably know them as the Knights Templar. Before we begin, I will be referencing a phenomenal science fiction series that has at least 9 episodes and several animated series. There are some similarities between the two, like how the Knights Templar met their end, or maybe they did not. It's just too bad Ewan McGregor is not available to narrate this. There is so much to tell about the Knights Templar that this episode will not do them justice. There are some very good articles online that you can peruse at your leisure. The original mission of the Knights Templar was to protect the pilgrims on their pilgrimages to the Holy Land. Jerusalem was well protected and secure, however, the routes to Jerusalem were not safe, as the pilgrims were regularly robbed and killed. The original order had about 9 knights. They had few financial resources and took donations to survive. The emblem you see here is the Templars' emblem, and it signified the vows of poverty the Templars took. As an order, they did not stay poor for long. Bernard of Clairvaux was a leading figure in the Roman Catholic Church, and he advocated for the Knights. The Knights Templar became a favored charity throughout the Christian world. Nobles would donate land, money, and often the sons of nobles would join the order. In 1139, Pope Innocent II exempted the order from obedience to local laws. They could cross borders freely and paid no taxes. The Knights Templar were the shock troops of their day. They were heavily armed on horses that were armored themselves, and the horses were trained to fight. The squadron charge, in reality, a bunch of them on horseback, but well led and well organized, would charge the enemy line. In many instances, the enemy broke and ran, leaving a gap in the line for follow-on forces to exploit. In today's world, that kind of charge is led by tanks, and the gap created is exploited by the infantry. In the days of the Knights Templar, the cavalry, if employed properly, ruled the battlefield, much like tanks can today. Not all the Templars were warriors. About 90% were involved in support of the Knights. The support usually centered on banking, because running crusades is costly. There were 2 distinct groups in the Knights Templar, the Knights and the Sergeants. Most of the Templars were laymen who fulfilled roles as infantry, archers, and mercenaries. Many were baggage bearers, priests, servants, laborers, and surprisingly, some women were members of affiliated nunneries. The number of full brother knights was low compared to the sergeants. Some sources say at the highest point the Templars numbered 15 to 20,000, with about 10% being knights. It seems recruits came from all over Europe, but France was the leading source of new recruits. The reasons men joined the Templars were varied, from defending Christianity. I would equate that to today, keeping the world safe for democracy, to the prospect of having a decent job, shelter, and food. Recruits had to be free men of legitimate birth, not in debt, and were expected to make a financial contribution to the order. Very few minors joined the order. There may have been a few, and they would have usually been sons who could not inherit estates and were sent by the parents who hoped they would get some benefit from the Templars. If a recruit wanted to be a knight, he had to be of noble birth after the 13th century. The life of a Templar was not all fun and games. They had to take vows, be celibate, obey orders from the Grand Master, and not take part in worldly pleasures. Attendance at church was mandatory, and communal meals were the order of the day. They also vowed never to retreat in battle, nor surrender, nor charge without order. They were not to wear flashy clothing, which most knights did back in those days. As an example, belts that other knights wore were usually a status symbol, but the Templars only wore a simple wool cord belt to symbolize their chastity. The Templars often wore brown or black cloaks that were quite plain, in keeping with their vows of poverty. The Templars were often used as in the advance as shock troops, as we've mentioned previously. In the Battle of Montgisard, they defeated a superior number of Muslim forces led by the Muslim commander Saladin. According to history, the Templars, about 500, assisted the infantry in holding off Saladin's army that may have numbered 26,000 troops. The Templars were renowned as fierce warriors and skillful tacticians as well. They were also strategic thinkers, and at one point they were going to form their own country. But they did suffer defeats as well. At the Battle of Hattin, the Crusader army, of which the Templars were a part of, suffered a costly defeat that ensured the Muslim forces were predominant in the Holy Lands. The Templars, numbering about 80 knights, under a new Grand Master, sallied forth into the arid hill country of Galilee without adequate food or water. They were overwhelmed in a day by the hot, arid climate, then surrounded and massacred by Saladin's army. Let's talk about their downfall. To put it mildly, the Templars had attracted a lot of attention, not only by kings, but by two rival orders, the Teutonic Knights and the Knights Hospitaller. The latter order is now the Order of St. John of Jerusalem. King Philip IV of France, who was indebted to the order for a huge sum, was looking for a way out, and he got it. On Friday the 13th of October, King Philip had the Grand Master and several other Templars arrested. It was alleged that the Templars had bizarre rituals that included spitting on the cross and denying Christ, among others. Plain, good old heresy. Other offenses included financial corruptions, fraud, and secrecy. Many of the Templars were tortured into confessing, and as a result, the Pope issued orders to all Christian monarchs in Europe to arrest all Templars. many were burned at the stake. In 1312, Pope Clement officially dissolved the order. On 18th of March 1314, the Grand Master Jacques du Molay was burned at the stake. According to legend, he cursed both the Pope and King Philip before he died. Pope Clement died a month later, and King Philip was killed in a hunting accident later that year. So, here's the question. Do the Knights Templar still exist? Yes, they do, in a manner of speaking. The Portuguese king, Denis I, refused to enforce the orders from the Pope. The Templars became the Order of Christ and are considered successors to the Knights Templar. Other than that, there are no known organizations that descended from the Templars. Now, the fictional order I spoke of that met a similar fate to the Templars had similar vows. The fictional order protected those who could not protect themselves, and the Templars were formed to protect pilgrims. Both orders have a master. Both orders have knights and apprentices. I have a good feeling that the fictional order was also quite wealthy and influential as well. Both orders were betrayed by their so-called allies. The Templars were betrayed by an indebted king, and the fictional order was betrayed by a devious dictator through his infamous Order 66. Of course, I'm speaking of the Jedi. And there are other fictional orders that mimic the Templars in some, but not all respects. The Night Watch from Game of Thrones comes to mind. This has been a real quick and dirty history of the Templars. They're a fascinating organization that were a force to be reckoned with in their time. As I've mentioned before, there is a lot of information online if you wish to research further. Until the next time, may the Force be with you. So here's a bit of a post note, if you will. I forgot to mention a few things. The one thing that there was a TV series in the 60s my mother used to watch religiously. It was called The Saint. And the hero's name was Simon Templar. We thought it might be a play on the Knights Templar. The series starred Roger Moore, who later became famous as 007. I tried to get a voice clip of various Star Wars people saying, "May the Force be with you," but it didn't work out well, so I'm not going to do it. Okay, so like I said, if you guys want to research the Templars a little further, please feel free to do so. Have a good one.